Welcome to this week's Energy series. We are Peyton, Corey, and myself, Yaila. We are talking about red flags when it comes to the leaders and people in authority out there, if I can say the word. So what are some red flags to watch out for? What have we noticed in the energy world, spiritual world, metaphysical world, to kind of clue you in to watch out for? So Peyton, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think this is a great thing to be talking about right now because, as the guides have been talking a lot about, it's time for us to up our discernment. And so, as more of us are starting to be our own teachers, be our own gurus, we're starting to look around and decide who is still someone we want to follow, a teacher that we want to put our trust in. And we're seeing a lot of variety in the spiritual community in terms of experience, integrity, all those great things that we consider when we are thinking about who to follow, who to use as a teacher or a mentor. And so I think there are a few things that I guess pop up for me or that kind of make me go, when I see them. And so one of the first things I think that is a red flag for me is any teacher or person in authority who is trying to make people dependent on them. So when this is someone who is taking the position that they have the truth, the only truth, the whole truth, that they can tell you what your truth is, all of that is something that is a big question mark for me these days. Because for me, what I want to see in a teacher, a mentor, a guide is someone who is empowering me. One of the things the Pleiadians talk about all the time is it's time to be our own guru. It's time to get our answers from within. And so as we're looking for teachers these days, I think it's really important to be looking for people who really are empowering people to do it themselves, to get their own answers, as opposed to trying to make you dependent on them or any other source of external authority. Because many of us, we've been raised to get the answers everywhere, but within ourselves. So as you're evaluating, leaders, teachers, anyone to put your trust in, or even just to follow and learn from, a great question is, are they teaching you to do it yourself? Or are they positioning themselves to be the answer, the ultimate authority for you? Because I think that is something that we are definitely moving away from. So I always look for someone who is going to teach me to do it myself. So that's number one for me. Another thing that I notice in a lot of people out there, and that is something that I look for now, is, are they walking their talk? Because talk is cheap and there are a lot of people talking right now. And so if I am going to follow someone, if I am going to certainly hire someone, are they doing what they teach? Have they succeeded in what they are going to teach me? So are you going to hire a coach to teach you how to create and manifest and live a high vibrational life, but they haven't managed to do that themselves? To me, huge red flag. So for me, and especially because this is something that as an intuitive, I do naturally, I rarely listen to the words coming out of someone's mouth. I'm listening to the energy behind it. And so just, is this person doing what they are promoting, what they are holding themselves out as? Because you'll find a lot of times it doesn't add up. So for me, that's another red flag. Another thing that I'm finding is a red flag is the energy that people are putting out, and they may have a very shiny, sparkly image. They may, look great on social media, but when you look at the energy behind the curtain, it's a very different story. And we're all getting more intuitive. We're all tapping into our natural gifts. And so we're starting to see when people aren't in integrity, when it is just a pretty picture we are being shown and an image, and there is so much false image out there right now. Things can look great. People can have beautiful words. You got to look behind the curtain. And so for me, is their energy supporting what they're talking about? If they are a spiritual teacher, are they loving and kind? Or do you start to see them getting really, I'll see this when I look at people's comments on social media. It's so revealing. Are people, coming from a place of empowerment, or are they snipping and sniping and criticizing? So people will usually show you their true colors. And for our leaders and for anyone that we are just looking to as a guide, a mentor, I always want to see that the energy matches what they are putting out. Let's see, what else comes to mind for teachers? Oh, another thing that kind of comes to mind is because we are moving so quickly through the ascension process, our tools and modalities are changing very quickly. And so one thing that I am looking for now is, are people who are putting themselves in positions of authority or are in positions of authority, are they changing and evolving as the energies change and evolve? Or are they just teaching the same thing that they have been teaching the same way for 20 years? Because for me, what I'm noticing with the Pleiadians is they are changing my modalities so quickly because they are saying we are in whole new energies now. The old way doesn't really work. So I'm always looking to see, is a teacher, is someone who I'm looking to for guidance and advice, are they evolving with the times? Or are they stuck in outdated practices, outdated, mental concepts, outdated spiritual concepts? Because our world is changing so fast that we need our teachers to be changing just as quickly. And that is continuing to keep up on their own education. Are they continuing to evolve? Or are they just, a one note? So for me, that's something else that I always look for. So I think these are some of the main things that come to mind. And then again, the other one is always ego and arrogance. That is always one of the red flags for me. And I want to see that the people that I'm turning to as my mentors, my teachers, have grown themselves, and that they are not coming from some of those very 3D places. And of course, we all fall into that. No one is perfect, but you can see quite a lot of that ego and arrogance in the spiritual community, quite as much as there is in the 3D community. And so for me, that is always a red flag that someone has not necessarily done the amount of personal work that could be done. So for me, that is always kind of a red flag when I see it. So those are some of the things that pop to my mind. How about you, Corey?
Ooh, very nice, Peyton. And I agree with all of it, what you said. Well, about authority and leadership, red flags. Yep, things that make you go, So one of the things that comes to mind for me is, yes, that guru energy, which I've talked about before. And that guru energy is my way or the highway. I know everything. I know how it's done. And you have to do it my way. That is a red flag. Another red flag is somebody who, isn't open-minded. And what I mean by that is, like Peyton, like you were talking about, somebody who changes with the times. Or if they make a mistake, admit it. Because none of us are perfect. I mean, we all make mistakes. But one of the big red flags for me, in my experience, is when an authority figure or leadership, teachers, don't admit that they've made a mistake. That's a big red flag for me. The also thing is integrity. That was the big thing. That's the big red flag for me. Do they walk the talk? Because we do see, I know for me, I have seen a lot of people say one thing, but do another thing. Do as I say, not as I do. And that is a big red flag. I loved what you said about, Peyton, about, whether a teacher, authority, or a leader is teaching the same thing, and not evolving with the times. That goes again with, open-mindedness. Another red flag, like you said, Peyton, is that ego. If you're looking for a spiritual teacher to teach you something that has some sort of authority or leadership, and they are filled with ego, that is a red flag. Because oftentimes that is, being shut off from any enlightenment, so to speak. Another red flag is, I just had it. Another red flag is, when somebody is trying to get you to follow them or look up to them through fear. For example, if you don't do this, you'll be taken away on an alien ship that's full of the bad guys, and you may not come back. So you need to learn how to do this or that. If somebody is trying to put fear into you to get you to do what they think is best for you, big red flag. And I've seen it a lot, especially lately. There's a lot of fear going around. Fear if you don't do this, fear if you don't do that. And that's a big red flag for me. There's that, also too, here's another big red flag. If somebody is of pure love and light, now we all want to be of pure love and light. However, again, it's another form of, we could call it dogma, where there's only love and light. Because what happens when we have to look at our shadow sides? It will get us to the love and light, but it's not the love and light. But to do our shadow work and our inner work, we have to look at the things that aren't, or I know I have, look at the things that are uncomfortable, that aren't so pretty. Maybe something that wasn't so loving that we did, that needs to be cleared so we can live in more neutrality and love and light. So somebody who is just all about just love and light and there's nothing else, big red flag. Let's see, anything else? That just might be it. I do have to say that there are a lot of what we call charlatans out there. And the most important thing to remember is to know that you're the one who has all the answers that you need. Finding somebody who, like Peyton, you said, wants to empower you for you to find your answers is really where you want to go. Instead of controlling you, putting fear into you, the charlatans, say, "Oh, come here, my pretty. Come look over this world over here." And it's sad, but that's what we call dichotomies. In order to know what you want or what's good for you, we have to see maybe what's not so good. And so we're getting a lot of examples in that in the world right now. So that's why we're putting out this video, so that through our experience, we just share with you the red flags that we've experienced, knowing that they're red flags, so that, things are moving so fast right now. So maybe so that you can at least have the knowledge. And if it resonates with you, take it. And if it doesn't, leave it. That's okay. because all the answers are within you. So what have you got, Yaila?
I love what both of you shared so much, and I resonate and agree with all of it. I think the biggest red flag for me when it comes to authority or leaders, even spiritual teachers out there, is, are they helping me come to my own decisions? I think if their one answer is the end all be all, that to me is a huge red flag, because everyone is different. We have different experiences. So if they are not leading you to find your own answers, huge red flag. Another red flag that I find is the separation, the divisiveness that I see out there in the world of, we believe this, we do this, so therefore we are better than the people who aren't. That is a huge red flag for me. It's totally fine to have your beliefs and totally fine to go with what you feel is an integrity and what works for you. But if you're trying to force that on other people, that's a huge red flag for me. Because we're different. We have different beliefs. We have different goals. We have different things. Obviously, if you're out there trying to physically harm someone or even emotionally or mentally harm someone, I feel like that is actually harmful when you're trying to be, push better than less than. We have different strengths, right? So that's a big, huge red flag for me when there are certain groups that are, we're good. These people, because they believe this one thing makes all of them bad. It's just, to me, that's a huge red flag. So the divisiveness, leading by fear, that was touched on by Corey. So if they are pushing you to stretch your boundaries out of fear, that is a huge red flag for me. You have your own inner GPS, yourself. And yeah, sometimes we have our own inner blocks and we have our own beliefs that we are working through. But chatting about that is, understanding that for yourself is the key. Not to be forced or pushed or felt to act in a certain way or do certain things out of fear that somebody outside of you is imposing into your space. That to me is a huge red flag. Another one is you can't ask them questions on why or what they do. That's a huge red flag. If they are not open to discussions about it, if they don't want you to question certain decisions or ways to do things, that to me is a huge red flag. Because I know for myself, and this is the practice that I've been being a teacher and a leader in some way, shape, or form, is I want my students to ask me questions. I want them to know why I've come to certain decisions so I can share my experiences and they get to decide for themselves. Do I follow that? Do I resonate with that? And if they do, cool. If not, cool. They can still find their own answers about it. But if you cannot question why certain things are being done or how they came to that, that's a huge red flag for me. Another one is, gosh, I feel like you guys touched on so many of the red flags that I would touch on. I think the big clear ones are, do they help? Are they in integrity themselves? And I love, are they in their own work? The teachers that I follow are teachers who are always students themselves. I also try to follow that path of I always want to be learning something. I always want to be growing. Yes, the foundations are great. There's certain, even the energy tools or things that you learn to eat that work really well. It's the foundation, but you should always be able to explore and try things on your own and get your own research and make it your own. And if you have anybody it has to be this one way and that's the only way, that for me is a huge red flag. So people who are in integrity, who stay in their work, who lead with love versus fear, and who keep people building their strengths, who let you question, let you be curious, who encourage you to be curious. Those to me are signs to look for. Everything else is a huge red flag. But ladies, you want to add anything else to red flags? Anything else coming to mind?
I had one thing come to mind, and that is because this is something that can happen in the spiritual community. And the three of us talk about this all the time. But for me, it's a red flag if someone has not had training, because you don't have to have any training. You can just have a social media account and proclaim yourself to be the guru of anything. and be completely full of you know what. So a shiny face, a huge following, beautiful pictures do not make an enlightened, evolved teacher. And so one thing, and this comes from me being in a very mainstream career where we had to prove our credentials. I am always one, I want to know where my teachers trained. I want to know that they are actually trained in what they are teaching me. Not that they watched a YouTube video themselves and decided they are now the guru of X modality, because there is a lot of that out there. So for me, and the three of us have trained extensively in many modalities, and we are happy to tell you about that. If you ask us, what is our basis for teaching something a certain way? We can tell you why we teach it a certain way, why we encourage certain things, discourage certain things. Now, we'll always tell you to do what's right for you, but we will be able to show you our credentials. And I think that is something that people don't really look at anymore. They assume that someone has a ton of followers, so they must know what they're talking about. And as we talked about in a couple of our energy videos, you have to have some safety protocols in place to do this work safely. Opening yourself up to energy work is not necessarily something you want to just wing. So for me, I always come back to, has someone actually been trained in what they are teaching me? Is it a requirement? No, you can have anyone you want as your teacher. But for me, it's something that I always look for. So I throw that out because we don't often think to mention that. So.
You know what? I'm so glad that you brought that up, Peyton, because it is true. And I've known some absolutely amazing psychic mediums and who aren't able to practice anymore, because they didn't have the schooling as to how to protect their energies. And so, yeah, I agree with that. Was a great one, Peyton. I'm glad you brought that up. Really glad you brought that up.
Absolutely. And one last thing I would add is a huge red flag is if every awareness in your body is firing and telling you it's uncomfortable, it's crunchy, that is a red flag enough. Like if it feels off for you, that's a red flag. It doesn't matter why. If it feels off, it feels off. And there's definitely some leaders out there that I was following for a long time. I was inspired by their work, and even piece of their work I still am, but sometimes it gets to a point where it just feels off for whatever reason. And I just had to trust that. So that's what I would wrap up with. If it feels off, it's off.
And one more, if they ever tell you to ignore your intuition, if they ever say that you should do this and you're getting a no and they don't honor that, to me, that would be a huge one too.
That's a good one. Yep.
Yeah. I think as leaders, the three of us here, we try to encourage questions. We try to encourage following your inner guidance. We try to encourage you to how to strengthen your inner guidance so you trust it more, because that's really what this journey is about. It's becoming sovereign in your own space, not following my sovereignty.
I know. And that too, that's why we always encourage you to make comments, because as you comment, we get to learn as well from where you come from. So that's why we're always like, comment. We want to hear your comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to learn more as well.
Yeah, as a teacher, I've never, even though I've studied things longer than my students, if they are sharing an experience that they're having within themselves, I would never, ever imagine saying they are wrong, because I personally haven't experienced that. I would ask more questions so they can find more answers. So anybody who's like, no, you don't know, that's a huge red flag. All right, ladies. Well, any last comments before? Okay, cool. Well, thank you again for joining us this week on red flags when it comes to your spiritual leaders and teachers out there. Be sure to like, share, follow, subscribe to our different YouTube channels listed below. We will see you next week with a new topic. See you next time.